Welcome students. Welcome to the lecture number 9 of chapter Conditional and Looping Constructs. In the previous lecture we discussed about the for loop, okay, and how we can use the for loop for repeating a particular task multiple times, and also we have used the for loop for a concept of series generation, okay. So today I am going to explain you about a special series named as a Fibonacci series, right? And then we will see some more applications of for loop. So let me begin with the Fibonacci series. Now what is basically a Fibonacci series? Okay. Now Fibonacci series is basically a special kind of series in which the first two numbers are fixed, that is the first number will always be 0 and the second number will always be 1. Okay. Now what about the third term? From third term onwards you will get the term by adding the previous two terms. Okay. So suppose if I want to generate the third term, then I have to add the first and second term. So first and second terms are 0 and 1. So when I add 0 and 1, I get the third term as 1. Okay. Now after that, suppose if I want to generate the fourth term, okay, so fourth term will be obtained by adding the second and third term, right? So fourth term will be 1 plus 1, that will be 2. Okay. And if I want to generate the third term, then fifth term, then it will be the sum of the third and fourth term, that is 1 plus 2, so it will be 3. And then 2 plus 3, it will be 5, 3 plus 5, it will be 8, and so on. Okay. So we have to do this program which will generate the Fibonacci series terms up to n number of terms. Okay. So how we are going to do this, let us see. Now suppose the value of n given by the user will be, suppose the user has given the value as 5. Okay. So now user want to generate the first 5 terms of this Fibonacci series. Okay. So let me write the code of that series simultaneously, right? So I just open the Python editor and click on the new file, right? And now I will just adjust the view of this new screen. Okay. So alright, so let me do the programming part simultaneously also. So now first thing is that first of all we have to take the value of n number of terms from the user. So the first step is n is equal to int, then I will write input, enter number of terms. Okay. So first I have to get the number of terms, right? That how many terms of Fibonacci series I want to print on the screen. Okay. Now as you know that the first terms, the first two terms are always 0 and 1. So let's take a variable a which basically holds the first term, and let's take another variable b which basically holds the second term, and after that we will take a variable c which basically is going to store the sum of the terms. Okay. So how we are going to do that? Now we have taken the term n, and now let me assign a variable that is value 0 to it, and then b variable value 1 to it. Okay. Now after that I have to check that whether the value of n is 1 or not. Okay. So if the value of n given by the user is basically 1, then it means the user wants only the single term of that series. Single terms mean he just wants the first term of the Fibonacci series. The first term is basically 0, and out of a and b the first term is basically stored in the variable a. So we will simply print the value of a for the user, right? If the value of n is basically 1. But suppose else, now what else means? Else means if the value of n is more than 1, that is either 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, any number of terms. Okay. So let me explain you one more thing. That suppose if the value of n is 2, then it means the user wants to print 0 and 1, that's it. Okay. But suppose if the value of n is 3, then the first two terms, that is 0 and 1, will be printed, and then the third term will be obtained by adding the first two terms, that is 0 plus 1, we will get the answer as 1. Then n is equal to 4. So the first term will be 0 and the second term will be 1. And now after that, from the third term onwards, we add the previous terms and obtain the new term. Okay, so 0 plus 1 is 0, 1, right? And for the fourth term, 1 plus 1 is 2. And similarly, if the value of n is 5, then we have to do the same thing. Now observe one thing, that is the most important part of this code, is that if the value of n is 2, then we have to print this 0 and 1, right? If the value of n is 3, then in that case also we have to print this 0 and 1. If the value of n is 4, then in that case also we have to print the value of 0 and 1. It means when the value of n is 2 or more than 2, then we have to first print the first two terms in all the cases. Okay. So what I will going to do, that else means the value of n is 2 or more than 2. Then in that case, first of all, I am going to print the value of a and the value of b. Okay. And put the end option as a space so that the cursor will remain in that line. Okay. So if the value of n is 2 or more than 2, then we go to the else part, and in else part first I am going to print the value of a and b, because as I told you in this case also, that in all the cases, okay, you have to print the first two terms of the Fibonacci series, but for the rest of the terms you have to run the logic of adding the previous terms, right? Now, so obviously I have to after printing this, the value of a and b, now I have to prepare a for loop which helps me in generating the next terms of the series. So I write the for loop as for I in range. Okay, so 1, suppose if I written like 1 comma n. So if the value of n is 5, then obviously it will run from 1 to 4. Okay, as you see that in this case, suppose if I write the loop like this, for I in range, range 1 comma n, right? So as you know, the value of n is basically 5, right? So in this case, as the range function will work and the value of n is basically 5, so we know that it will generate a list. Okay, this range function will generate basically a list whose first term begins with 1, and then the next terms are like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's it. Okay, so if I write n as 5, if the value of n is 5, and if I use the value of n directly in the for loop like this, 1 comma n, then my for loop will run 4 times. Okay, but now just think over it. Suppose the value of n is 5, so I already print first two terms of that series. Okay, as the value of n is 5, so I already print the first two term of this Fibonacci series. Okay, and after that, then I have to execute this for loop for the rest of the terms, not for the first two terms. Suppose if the value of n is 5, then the first two terms are printed, so we are left with only the 3 terms. Okay, so I want that this loop, when the value of n is 5, then I want that this loop will run only 3 times. Okay, I want when the value of n is 5, the first two terms are already printed, So I want the for loop will run for the rest of the 3 terms only. Okay, but if I write like this, then you can see that my for loop will run 4 times, because range, if I range 1 comma n, if I put the value of n as 5, then obviously it will generate these numbers. So according to these numbers, my for loop will run 4 times, and I don't want to do this. But suppose if I write like this, n minus 1. So n minus 1 is basically the 4. Okay, so it will be 4, and when this value will be taken as 4, then obviously it will generate a list which begins from 1 to 3. So if the list contains these 1 2 3 numbers, then it means the loop will run 3 times only. Okay, the loop will run 3 times only. Or if you want to do like this also, suppose for I in range, as we know the first 2 terms are already printed. Okay, so basically first 2 terms are already printed, so we have to print from the third term. So we will write 3 comma n. Okay, but suppose if I write 3 comma n, and as you know the value of n is 5, so it will become 3 comma 5. So obviously it will generate a series which begins from 3 and ends up at 4. Then but that will be not sufficient, because we want the if the value of n is 5, then first 2 terms are printed and we want to run the loop 3 times more. So I can put n plus 1. So when I put n plus 1, so obviously this value becomes 6, and this loop will generate this range function will generate 3 values, 3 4 5. So in this way also the loop will run 3 times. So it's up to you, either you can use this case, or if you want you can use this way. Okay, so over here I have to write n minus 1. Now after that, what I have to do, I know that the first term is present in the variable a and the second term is present in the variable b. So first of all I have to add these 2 terms, so I write c is equal to a plus b. Okay, and then after that I will print the value of c and put the end option as the space. Okay, so when I do like this, then what will happen, a is 0 and b is 1, and when I add those 2 values, then I will get the 0 plus 1, the value as 1. Okay, so suppose if the value of n is 5, so first 2 terms 0 and 1 are already printed. Okay, and this loop when run first time, then the value of c is obtained at 1, and we simply print the value as c as 1. Okay, so now up to this time this variable is taken as the variable a, this 0 value is present in the variable a, this b value 1 value is present in the variable b, and when I add these 2 values, the c, this 1 value will get stored in the variable c, and after that I printed the value of c also. Okay, but now for the next time, if this loop runs one more time, or then in that case I have to, in spite of adding 0 and 1, I have to add this 1 and 1. But you know my expression is c is equal to a plus b. So if the value of a remains 0 and b remains 1, then the answer will always be 1. But because we have to generate more terms of this series also, so in that case we have to change this value of a and b. Okay, so right now this a is holding the first term, b is holding the second term, and c is holding the third term value. Now after printing it, we have to change them. Okay, so how we are going to change these values? So a will store the value of b, okay, and the b will store the value of c. Now let me show you that how it will work. Okay, so suppose after printing this one, then I have to first interchange these values, that first put the value of b in a and then c in b. So I have to do this work, that a is equal to b and b is equal to c. Okay, so now the value of b gets stored in a. So right now the value of b is 1, so a will get the value as 1, and the c value get transferred to b, so again it gets the value as 1. Okay, so now after interchanging, the control again moves to the starting of the loop, right? Let me just copy this code and just paste it over here. Okay, just wait. Yes. So now this is my code. Okay. So after doing the interchange work, the control again moves to the starting of the loop. Okay, and suppose if the loop has to run one more time, then it comes down and first it will add the value of A and B and put it in C. So A current value is now 1 because right now this one is A and this one is B. Okay, so C is equal to A plus B, so A will get the value as 2. Then we will print the value of C, that is 2 get printed, and after that again we interchange the values. So right now this is C. Okay, so after interchanging, the value of A will get stored in B, sorry, the value of B gets stored in A, so it will get the value as 1, and the value of C gets stored in B, so the variable B will get the value as 2. Okay, and then again it moves to the starting of the loop, and suppose if one more time we have to execute this loop, then it comes down. C is equal to A plus B, so 1 plus 2 will becomes 3, and then we will print the value of C. So value of C will be 3, that is printed on the screen, and then again we will interchange the values. So 2 gets stored in A, 3 gets stored in B, and so on. This work continues. Okay, so let me complete this code. Now the code is complete, and let me run this code first. Okay, so first of all I have to save it. Right, so I will save it by the name of P2, and now I will execute it. So now it is asking me about the number of terms. Suppose if I have given the number of terms as 8, so you can see the series is printed that 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Okay, so this is the code for the Fibonacci series. Now after this code, I give you one question for your home task. Okay, you can first, you have to note this coding, right? And now I am going to give you another series, and that series is basically named as the Lucas series. Okay, so that you have to do yourself. Now what is the pattern of the Lucas series? When we talk about the Lucas series, in this series the first 3 terms are same, that is 0, 1 and 1. Okay, now the process basically begins from the 4th term. So the 4th term will obtain by adding the first 3 terms. So 0 plus 1 plus 1, we get the answer as 2. Now if you want to obtain the 5th term, then I have to add this 1 plus 2, so the answer will be 4. Okay, and if I want to obtain the next term, then it will be obtained 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 4 is 7, and next term, then 2 plus 4 is 6, 6 plus 7 is 13, and so on. Okay, so this you have to manage, that how you are going to generate this Lucas series. Okay, so I have already given you the idea of the Fibonacci series. Now it's your task to write a program to generate this Lucas series. Okay, so we have done the topic of the series printing by using the for loop. Now the next topic that we are going to deal with the for loop is basically the pattern printing. Okay, so now I am going to explain you about the concept of pattern printing. So what is basically a pattern printing? So pattern printing, actually by using this topic, that is pattern printing, we are going to practice a particular topic that is called as the nested loops. Okay, so what is basically the nested loop? So when a loop is present inside another loop, then it is called as nested loops. Okay, so this is basically the definition of the nested loop. When a loop is present inside another loop, then it is called as the nested loop. Okay, so now let us see a question in which this concept of nested loop will be used. Now before writing that question, let me give you a simple example of this nested loop also, that how this nested loop will work. Suppose if I written like for a in range, let me take a small value 1 comma 3. Okay, so for a in range 1 comma 3, and inside this for loop I write another loop that for b in range 1 comma 4. Suppose I write like this. Okay, so and in this way I'm just going to print suppose print the value of b. Okay, and end is equal to, suppose I put space. Okay, so I have written a code like this. So in this case you can see that this b for loop is under the a for loop. Okay, so this a1, this outer one is this a is basically called the outer for loop, and this b loop is basically called as the inner for loop. Okay, so this one is basically the outer for loop. Okay, and this one is basically called as the inner for loop, right? So this for loop, which basically handled by the variable a, is the outer for loop, and the for loop which is handled by the variable b is basically the inner for loop. So this is the pattern of the nested loops. And how the execution of this nested loop work, let me also clarify you this thing also. So when this for loop will run, so for a in this range 1 comma 3 will generate a series which begins with 1 and ends up at 2. Okay, and for b in, and the series which is presented in the b, it starts with 1 and ends up at 3. Okay, and then we have to print the value of b, right? And end is equal to it is given as space. So first let me explain you the working of this for loop, how they are going to execute. So when the control comes to the first for loop, that is this a1, okay, so first the value of the first value of the list get assigned to the variable a. Okay, so in this case the variable a get the value as 1, right? So as a gets the value, so the control comes under the for loop, and when the control comes under this for loop, then this inner for loop, that is b, it start executing. Okay, and when it start executing, first the value of 1 gets stored in this variable b. Okay, so first this b variable will get the value as 1. Okay, so as b is getting the value, so it comes down and it print the value of b, that is 1 is printed on the screen. Okay, suppose I take a suppose I draw this diagram. This basically represents the screen. Okay, so what will happen? The current value of b, that is 1, get printed on the screen, right? And after printing, the control will again moves to the b loop. Okay, so once this b loop will finish, then the control moves to the beginning of this a loop. Okay, so now again the control moves to this b loop, and then b variable will get the next value of the list, that is b will get the value 2. Okay, so in this case b is also getting the value, so control comes down and it will print the value of b, that is 2 gets printed. And as you know that end option is given with the space, so obviously all terms are printed in the same line, right? Now after that what will happen? Then the control again moves to the b loop. Okay, and then the b variable will get the next value, that is 3. As b also getting some value, so again the control comes under the loop, and now the 3 value of b, that is 3, get printed. And after that the control moves to the B loop, but at this time B will get no value. Okay, so as B is not getting any value, so the B loop terminates, and after that when the B loops terminate, the control moves to the outer loop. Okay, so when the control moves to the outer loop, then it assigns the next value to the variable A. So the variable A will get the value as 2. So as variable A gets a new value, then again control comes down, and when the control comes down, you know the B loop, the variable, the for loop in which B is used, is terminated once all. Okay, so when the control again comes to the loop, then this B for loop will start from the beginning. Okay, so when the control comes next time under the main for loop, then the B loop begins again, and again it starts putting the value as 1. Okay, so it will print the value of B as 1. After printing, it moves up, and then it assigns the second value out to B, that is 2. So in this case also B is getting a value, so it comes down and it prints the value of B, that is 2. Then again moves to the B loop, then it will get the value as 3. Then control again comes down and it will print the value as 3, and when the control again moves to the B loop, then B will get no value. Okay, so when there is no value available for the B variable of the for loop, then this loop terminates. Okay, so when this loop terminates, then the control again moves to the outer loop, but when the control moves to the outer loop, then the A variable is also not getting any value, so no value for the A variable. Then in that case the main outer loop is terminated. So this is basically the execution pattern of the nested loops. Okay, so I hope you understand that what is basically the nested loop. So in the next class we are going to do some questions in which this concept of nested loop is used. So that's all for today. In the next class we will do some questions related to the pattern printing. Okay, so just practice the Fibonacci series and do the Lucas series, and also try to make some small questions, make some small code related to this nested loop. Okay, so that you can better understand that how the nested loop will execute. Okay, so thank you very much and have a nice day.